The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yekel Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.
Welcome to Postcards. I'm Dana Johnson. This episode, we'll travel to Willmar, Minnesota, and visit Fred Cogelo and Ron Adams, two of the greatest artistic talents living in western Minnesota. First, Ron Adams has been painting for over 40 years and is presently working on a large-scale mural for the Willmar Public Library. His latest exhibit portrayed the theme of love and companionship. Ron's focus on familiar relationships shines through the bold colors of his memorable artwork.
I'm not real sure why I have chosen painting. I think painting chose me. I can remember in grade school that when they asked the kids what they wanted to be when they grew up, I wanted to be a cartoonist. And that's a form of being a painter, so it's just been who I am. My earliest memory connected with art is sitting in church with my father, and as a small child, and my dad used to draw Goofy for me on the edge of the bulletin, and then I would always have to draw Mickey Mouse next to his Goofy. From age 14 on, I don't remember a time when I wasn't working on a painting or thinking about a painting. The majority of my early work was done in a pop art vein, and I did pictures of mostly pop culture icons. And as a teenager, the most important influences I had were rock stars. So there are numerous pictures of the Beatles, Bob Dylan, people like that, and went through kind of a Marilyn Monroe phase. Definitely I've always influenced by the 60s and 70s. And the other necessary ingredient that I have in my creative process is music and listening to mostly rock and roll. I've sometimes have said to people that I don't know if I enjoy painting because of the music or if I enjoy the music because of the painting. I paint all in oil now. When I first started, it was all acrylic. The fact that oil paints take longer to dry is probably their biggest advantage over acrylic. Sometimes it can be a disadvantage. Like when you're trying to paint white next to red, it's very annoying sometimes because the least bit of red into the white turns everything pink. But no, they're just much easier to blend, and there's just more things you can do oil. I don't know if there's a name for the style of painting I do or not. I consider myself a regionalist because I, like other regionalists like Grant Wood and Thomas Hart Benton, Andrew Wyeth, people like that, have a tendency to paint subjects that are within their realm. For me, it's more intimate to be painting somebody I know rather than somebody I don't know, I guess. Every painting seems to have a story behind it one way or another. There was I guess you would call him a bachelor farmer, and he was quite a character who lived in the Willmar area, and his name was Walt Somerville. And this was back when I worked at the Kaneohe County Historical Society, and he used to volunteer out there on Thursday afternoons and come and help us, and so I got to know him quite well. But when I started doing oil pastels, I really wanted to do a picture of Walt. And since my work has often been influenced by Van Gogh, Van Gogh did a painting of his mailman, postman. And I was looking at that picture and thinking that this looks an awful lot like Walt. The postman had a very long, curly beard, and he had a uniform that had gold buttons down the front, and postman's hat. And Walt always wore these dirty overalls with the two gold buttons, and his little striped hat, and his scraggly beard. So I did a painting that was kind of a takeoff on the Van Gogh picture, and it's called The Day Vincent Met Walt. Definitely the three people that I've painted the most are my late wife, Linda, and my two daughters, Jamie and Emma, because they're the most important people in my life. Well, actually, I should include a fourth one in there, since I have a tendency to like to paint myself a lot, too. Close to my heart, I think my art has really helped me through the loss of my wife. It's like you kind of get in a zone when you paint that you don't really get any other way. It's something that just kind of takes you away from everything else in life, and you're just there. That's what you're doing, and it's a great release. Sparkle and shine, never a tear, baby of mine. We're at the Barn Theater in Willmar. This is one of my favorites. It's an oil painting that I did about 3 years ago, and it's called The Shroud of Mom, and it was done from a photograph of my late wife, Linda, and my youngest daughter, Emma, sleeping on a couch together. One of the things that I like about the painting is the repetition of shapes and patterns that I used. Like the zigzag in the couch is also reflected in the zigzag wood pattern in the ice box, and is repeated again in the blanket. And then the rounded shapes of the hips is reflected in the rounded shapes in the quilt behind, and then kind of a reverse rounded shape on the rug on the back of the couch, and of course the rounded cat. Every artist's favorite painting is always the one they're working on at the time, and This painting that I'm working on now is a parade scene. It started because I applied for a Legacy Arts grant and received one, and I'm doing the painting for the public library. It started out that I wanted to have the parade passing in front of the crowd of people, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought that the crowd is what I look at the most when I go to a parade, because as a photographer, often the most interesting thing at a parade is the expression on people's faces when the parade is going by. And then it occurred to me that I could have a storefront behind the people and have the passing parade reflected in the windows behind them. I think the vibrant colors is kind of goes back to my origins as a pop artist. My work is very poppy. I think anyone can paint. I don't know if anybody can paint well, but anybody can paint. And it's such a joyful thing to do that I've often said that the world would be a much happier place if everyone painted, that there would be less struggle and strife in the world if everyone painted. But then I discovered that Adolf Hitler was a painter, so there goes that theory out the window.
Together, dancing cheek to cheek.
Next, we'll join Fred Cogelo, a world-renowned reductive woodcarver who's developed his own tools and techniques. His detailed sculptures are collected internationally. Today, we'll find out why Fred has been noted as one of the most talented reductive carvers of our time.
Well, the way I got into wood carving was sort of following the path of least resistance, combined with predestination and making myself unemployable. If you look back at the number of forebodings or omens or whatever, there were quite a few. Probably the first of which was about third grade. I had a teacher assigned us to carve a Scotty dog out of ivory soap, and you were instructed to bring a table knife from home, which I did, and was the worst knife you could have brought to do any sort of carving, but I ended up breaking a leg off the dog, and I politely raised my hand and asked her if there was some way of mending it. She snatched it from me and said, "You're hopeless. You'll never become a carver, or never be a carver." My father had aspirations of being a furniture maker, I think, and he died when I was not quite 7, but he left a great number of machines, and I became the caretaker for those machines, and that fueled my interest. And as I wandered from this to that and the other thing, I was working with disturbed adolescents in a residential setting, and every 6 weeks you had to do a week of night watch. And one of the kids had taken a block of 2x4, and they were supposed to carve it up, and he'd gotten one corner rounded off and abandoned it, and it ended up in the night watch office. And so I went and I took a comic strip that was there from the Pogo series and had Albert the Alligator, and I threw that on there and went down and bandsawed it off out on their bandsaw, and went and brought, my father had some old palm tools, and I brought those and started carving away, and I just never quit. A typical day. Well, I get up, walk the dog, you come back, read the papers, have breakfast, I get out here usually around 8 o'clock or a little after. I do try to get out here in the mornings for sure because it's the best light, but on an average day during the workday itself, I'm lucky if I can get 5 to 6 hours out here. And so I'm glad that my wife oftentimes likes to work late herself and allows me to come back out and work for a couple hours more in the evening. Work when you can and while you can. I am one of the few practitioners in wood carving of what is known as Mizo relief. That it's taking a fairly thick piece of wood relative to the elements that are in it and utilizing it to its fullest advantage. And so you can see that, you know, the face is almost fully in the round in some respects, and other respects there's compression of detail, or from some angles it might look a little odd. Your challenge with this is to create the fullest or the widest possible aesthetic viewing range from side to side and from top to bottom. You want something where it really engages the viewer, draws it into the thing. You come up with your design first, then you look for a piece of wood that matches it, for the most part. But basically, you look for a piece of wood that will do your best to enhance the design that you've got as it executed. By placing the face within the piece in a certain way, you can determine how the rings are going to work on the face, and to some extent. This one, like I say, is a little bit too grainy, and so I probably will end up bleaching the face on this one. And my wife doesn't like it, but I do. She likes to have everything sort of the monotone, which is unusual because when it comes to dressing, I'm a monotone person, and she's the colorful one, and my work, it's sort of the opposite. My wife has been my #1 supporter throughout all my years as a carver, and in fact, back when we were going together, she used to commission a few things, but you know, she's very proud when I do well. People often ask me what I like about wood carving, and I'm not sure I like anything about it. It's not something I really have a choice in doing. It's more or less a compulsive disorder. I sometimes, like anyone else, get frustrated with it, but there's something. It's almost like it's my duty to do it, and I can take up to 2 weeks away from it, you know, for traveling or something. But it's almost something I have to do. Yes, I'm often asked, you know, what's the secret? You know, is it studying under this, or, you know, reading that, or trying this? And the secret, I think, is brain damage. And there's actually some sorts of academic things I could cite for that, but I've had a number of brain concussions, and I think it just sort of frees you up and lets you forget the right things, and it, you know, you don't hear it as much anymore, but they used to talk a lot about right brain and left brain, and, you know, what controls this and that. And the thing to do is actually to sort of balance the two. Occasionally you have to stop and say, oh, you know, this is starting to look like a Picasso or something, and so you have to go back and do some basic referencing and engineering and check out some of your proportions. Thematically, I would say that most of my portraits are of old men.
I'm seeing a pattern here. Every face has wrinkles.
Oh, yes. Well, I basically just enjoyed a lot of the old guys in my life, I think, and plus they're their faces are craggier, they're not as vain as women. The more you get into it, then you start to realize the nuances and subtlety, but I'm hoping that I'm pretty soon ready to start doing some really good female faces, but I'm not sort of certain yet. Well, my most favorite piece, I'm not sure that there is one that's my most favorite. The long-term one, I would say, is I did a piece for our local community theater. Has a started with a memorial, or as a memorial to a friend, a former neighbor, and the only fellow that ever directed me in a play. Only director, period, to direct me in a play. And it's a piece called Silent Soliloquy. It's at the Barn Theater in Willmar. And that is, that I would have to say is probably one of my best pieces and one of my favorites.
This old boy rides for free.
I have a number of others that I certainly like very much. I like most of my life-size figures. This latest one is called A Penny Saved. That's the Fairleigh one.
And the rest goes on the loan.
Well, I've got a friend and a previous client who is involved with a corporation and its art collection, and he invited me to come out and put on a show of at least 6 new deep relief portraits, and sometime in early 2013, and so that is the goal, and so I'm working on that. That's what this particular portrait of the Finn Hall Band is getting prepared for. And the first relief that I've done for my show coming up in Los Angeles is called Famished Fritz Fingers Feldman, felicitously forks fine funeral fare following Friday's fond farewell for philandering philanthropist Philip Flatavo's fabulously flaming femme fatale Phyllis Florin. It's also known as What Don't Kill Ya. But that's just a portrait of a fellow I met at a funeral down in Morton, and the fellow just had such an engaging personality that, and I wanted it somewhere. He had injured his hand, and so he was missing a couple fingers. I like to give all of my carvings a code name, because it's something where I'm a firm believer that pride goeth before the fall, and so you never want to. In fact, I've gotten a little loose on it lately. I don't like to tell people what I'm working on for fear that might be the project that doesn't turn out, you know. So you don't want to call a man happy till he's dead, as the Greeks say. And back around the turn of the century, I was commissioned to do a tribute to our local spacewalking astronaut, Pinky Nelson. And it ended up a very elaborate and involved sort of a thing. And it was a highly experimental relief. It was 8 foot high and 8 foot wide and 26 inches deep at the deepest. By the time it ended up there. And I wasn't at all sure it was going to turn out, so when people asked me what I was working on, I would tell them I was working on a 6-wing chicken. Anyway, out of the high school, there was a large relief carving of mine. It was a tribute to Pinky Nelson, our local spacewalking astronaut. In about 2000, I think we installed it, yeah. Pinky Nelson and I were in the same German class in high school. He was a year behind me, and he once actually spoke to me. He asked me what this Einmann was, and I said, I don't know. That was the extent of our interaction in high school. He was a very good athlete, and he was a serious student, and good fellow. I really didn't know him beyond that. I mean, he he was in with the athletes and the jocks, and the people were socially accepted, and I wasn't. He came out for the dedication. And then I did get to know him a little bit. But in fact, we have some nice pictures of. I made up a model, not quite a life-size horse, but close to it, for my models to sit on when I worked out the design for it. And then so we brought that out there for the dedication. We had a party. You should have been there. It would have been great. But we had Pinky and his wife. Has the two characters, the Greek goddess Selene and of course himself.
And made me live all alone.
If I had to give advice to anyone else, I would say, don't follow my example. Do something worthwhile in your life. No, I don't know. It's if I could do it over again, I probably would have gotten serious about it sooner. This, to some extent, has been my way of killing time till time kills me. But I never anticipated that that I had the potential to become as good as I've got the potential to become. I still have that potential, but my eyes are getting weaker all the time, and need more and more magnification to see all the detail, and as I like to think about, it's like that song that was popular long ago about a friend of mine is going blind, and through the dimness he sees much more clearly than I, or something. Yeah. So it's a little ironic that now my eyeballs are really getting shot, that I'm actually starting to really see what I would have liked to have seen 10, 20 years ago or more. But no, I was more of the philosophy that life is a joke and death is the punchline, and I've always had an incredible thirst. So
That's all for now. For more information, go to our website. Join us again next time on Postcards.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yekel Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflection Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota, a relaxing vacation or great location for an event. Explore alex.com. Easy to get to, hard to leave.